So yesterday, we had the end of the Democracy Spring protest, and actually, if I'm not mistaken, I saw this morning right before I came on air that there's still some activism going on right now, but it actually lasted a longer time. I think this was going on for about a week because Americans who want to get money out of politics marched from Philadelphia 140 miles to Washington, D.C., and then they did a sit-in on the Capitol steps. And guess what? More than 600 people showed up. 400 people were arrested. And that actually, according to the DC police, that actually breaks a record on arrests for civil disobedience. So that's fascinating, and there's many, weird angles just to that fact. Like I was thinking about how, haven't there been like neo-Confederate protests and white nationalist protests at the Capitol? And really, those people were arrested less than those who peacefully called for getting money out of politics. And there's many videos that are coming out of there. There's all these pictures, and you can see that people are just sitting in at the Capitol steps, and they're doing some chants, they're doing some songs, they're obviously holding up signs that say "End the corruption," and this is exactly what the country needs. And I'm optimistic looking at this that this is something that can really, really grow. So when you look at Occupy Wall Street, now they were viciously cracked down on in a violent way and in an unfair and disproportionate way. When you look at Occupy Wall Street, it was a movement that grew and grew and grew, and the next thing you know, they were these gigantic protests, just huge protests. Well, I think the Democracy Spring movement, it has the potential, I don't know because I don't have a fucking crystal ball, but it has the potential to be something really, really big, perhaps bigger than Occupy Wall Street, and perhaps it'll get something done more so than Occupy Wall Street was able to get something done. Because the core of what they're arguing for in this movement is not only the most important issue, you can make an argument it's the only issue. Because without substantively addressing the issue of money in politics and legalized bribery and corruption, nothing is going to get done. Nothing's going to get done. Why? Because special interests and lobbyists and corporations and the donor class, they totally control the politicians. So in other words, the American people don't get what they want at all in any way, shape, or form. It's just the elite who get what they want. Now, you might say, hey, this is a left-wing PC myth or whatever. But no, if you actually go to the political science studies, there's been so much research on this, and there was a Princeton study that from about a year and a half ago which found that that indeed is the case. It's the case that when you track the public opinion polls, so what the American people want, that translates into the legislation that we get none of the time. But when you look at what the rich want, what the donor class wants, they almost always get what they want. Guys, this is the cancer, this is the virus that has destroyed our democracy and undermined our system of government. Did you know that over 90% of the time, the person that raises the most money in Congress ends up winning that election? So think about the effects of that, because what that means is the person who sells out the most, the person who sells out the best to our corporate overlords ends up getting elected. Now, some people turn around here and they blame the people, but it's not the people's fault, because what happens is when you raise the most money, you're able to buy the most ad time, get the most coverage, and when you get the most coverage, you can lie like a motherfucker about how you're for the people and the other person's not. So people are duped into voting for people who are representing corporations and not the people on both the Democratic side and the Republican side. And then we're left with a cycle where we elect people, and then you do an opinion poll a month later, and the American people say only 9% of them think Congress is doing a good job. Wait, what the fuck is that? So the Congress's approval rating, goes back and forth between like 9% and 20%. How? How can that happen? Even after we just elect them. You go and you do an opinion poll, it's like 9% of people think you're doing a good job. How? You just fucking voted for them. Well, the answer is simple. It's like we're voting for the people, knowing we're always voting for the lesser of two evils, and then they go to Washington and they immediately do the opposite of representing us. They represent their donors at the expense of us, And people know it. They might not be able to describe in detail how it happens, but they get that gut feeling. And they can see it. They can see it. Why is it that when Wall Street goes under, immediately Democrats and Republicans agree we got to rush in and bail them out, and we got to bail them out with middle-class taxpayer money? I mean, isn't that crazy? Like, the people who should be getting the bailout are the middle-class taxpayers. But no, they say we're going to take your money and give it to Wall Street banksters who crashed the economy, made horrible decisions, bankrupted their own companies, and we're going to say we need to pay them the money to retain the talent. What talent? They're the ones who crashed the economy and bankrupted their own companies. They made horrible decisions. They should be fired immediately. No, we got to rob your money, middle-class taxpayers, and give it to them. Does it ever work like that with a local business? You know, your very important local dry cleaner, grocery store, deli, or whatever it may be that everybody goes to within a 5-block radius if you live in a densely populated area. Did they ever say, oh, they're going out of business, we got to rush in, the government's got to rush in, either the state government or the federal government, we got to bail them out. This is a staple of the community. Never. Why? Because they didn't pay their bribes. Whereas on Wall Street, most of the big banks, most of the investment firms, they did pay their bribes. So not only do they get bailed out, they get to have no regulation. You know, there's so many loopholes. Glass-Steagall isn't even back in place when the lack of Glass-Steagall was one of the main factors that led to the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. Guys, our country, our government has been stolen from us. Now, understand, I'm not a radical. If you want to defend this system, the radical is you. Because all we're asking for, certainly all I'm asking for, is a system of clean elections. So you make it so that you have a battle of competing philosophies from different politicians. The voters pick the philosophy they like the most, and then said politicians try to fight to implement that philosophy. If we have a system where it's only the public paying the politicians, and you can pay them well, I'm fine with paying them well, I'd like to pay them well, well then you're going to have the politicians represent the people. But if you have a system where they have to raise private money, and they have to raise it from Wall Street, and people with so much power, obviously you're going to get a system that's biased in their favor. So people wonder, like, how the fuck is it that we have a government where there's this bloated military-industrial complex? We spend trillions on war. We spend more than the next 9 biggest militaries in the world combined, and most of them are our allies. Over 50% of discretionary spending is military spending. How does that happen in this country? How does it happen that, you know, Wall Street banks get billions of dollars in subsidies every year? How does it happen that ExxonMobil gets billions of dollars as a corporate welfare check, as a subsidy every year, when they're already one of the most powerful and profitable companies in the world? How does that happen? They don't need it for research and development, as is claimed. How does that happen? How does that happen? Well, it happens because those are the people who bought the fucking government. So unless you get the money out of the system, the best you can hope for is somebody like Barack Obama, who's as far left within the confines of the system as you can get. But being as far left within the confines of this system as you can get is, unfortunately, center-right on the overall spectrum and pro-corporatist and pro-establishment, and you're only going to get a bone thrown to the American public every once in a while, and you're never going to get what we really want implemented. Don't take my word for it. Look at the opinion polls. 80% of the American people want an increase in the minimum wage at a federal level. Why haven't we gotten it? They're not listening to you. They're listening to the corporations who don't want it. You have 60% of the American people say under no circumstance cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and education spending. What's the government doing? They've been trying to do that for the past 4 or 5 years. The list goes on and on. Only 17% of the American people still want to be in Afghanistan. It's more unpopular than Vietnam was at this point. Is there any talk about fully getting out of Afghanistan? No. Even the Democrats say we're going to stay in Afghanistan. These people who are doing what they're doing in Washington, D.C. are absolute heroes. What if we kept doing this? What if the American people got together, and they got together whether it's every year or every month, and they said, we're going to keep doing this until they fucking listen to us? What if it actually, in a peaceful way, disrupted fucking business as usual and disrupted their lives? What if they looked out the window at the Capitol and they saw 100,000 people out there? What if they looked out the window and they saw 1 million people out there? You think they would feel the pressure?